So we must remember that in this treatment we are privileging the urban centers. In a biased way here, we seem to be privileging urban centers over the peripheries, or centers over the peripheries. Now, this may be ultimately because, again, of economic reasons, political reasons. Usually we find these centers are established as these symbolic political capitals. Okay, capital cities we see a lot. Okay, now moving on in the essay. Okay. So he moves on to say, so in many ways these images are opposed. Okay? Formally, the idea of community tends to privilege homogeneity and stasis, while the idea of center-periphery privileges variation and change. Okay, so we see that there is this. We see this dialectic forming. Okay, this opposition. We see one of typical modernist approach here. Of the homogenous kind of establishment of the nation and cultural uniformity. On the other hand, we see a more systemic reading of or a mechanist, functionalist, and structuralist, structural functionalist approach here, where we see variation and change, but a regulated and at least consistent to some degree within its own maintaining system. Although the system itself fluctuates, the system itself perpetuates itself and is not necessarily dependent on any one of its particular parts. Okay. So moving on, we see here, and in practice they have frequently been used against one another. And then he's talking again about the relationship between these two academic methods of analyzing the phenomena of Mexican migration. Okay, so here he says, and they have frequently been used against one another. Community being the peripheral, being the principal socio-spatial image invoked by modern theory, and center-periphery, of course, serving as the crucial counterimage for dependency theory and world systems approach. Okay, but their opposition should not be exaggerated. In many works they have been used in tandem. In fact, the key tension between modernization theory and its critics lies less in frictions over spatial imagery than in disagreement about the intentions of the center and the nature of its influence. Okay. So again, here we see these things, these two academic approaches, not necessarily being used as conflict, but the tension itself revealing an area of study. So it becomes now the issue that the two are not necessarily diametrically opposed. We see we are working towards a synthesis here of establishing some notion of this migration in the wake of the failure of certain theories, in this case modernity or modern theory, to identify the notion of moving and changing society and social factors. Okay? Or typical modernist theory being able to do this. Right. Okay. Indeed, even when the two images have been in conflict, they have supported one another negatively, each being treated as the only viable alternative to the other. Opposed, combined, or altering, they have long dominated work on rural Mexico with the causal authority of commonsensical. Now, the last paragraph on the page, and we're going to skip most of this here. Migration has always had the potential to challenge established spatial images. Of course, we have seen this, okay? We know that embedded in our traditional or so far established notion of nationalism, we have seen how it is embedded in this notion of space, and this move to not only towards spacelessness but towards relocation and the capacity for globalization and telecommunications to transcend or transgress the limitations of these national borders and cultural identity, and also to allow the possibility of satellite communities to exist outside of the not only the national borders which seemingly demarcate the possible limits of center and periphery, but they we now open up a possibility of identifying a periphery that orbits outside of an established national border. Okay. Now, moving on to the next page here, kind of jump in. Roger Rouse takes a look here at two issues surrounding the reading of Mexican migration. So first, because migration itself, because migration is evidently a movement between places, it has commonly been treated as a movement from one set of social relationships to another. Okay. So here as well, there's the assumption of the embedded or the necessary relationship of spatio or geographical area and social relationships, that somehow these things cannot preserve themselves outside of the established national border. Thus, numerous studies have sought to gauge the changes that migrants have undergone by comparing the system of family organization, kinships, friendship, dominance in their places of origin with those they have developed in places to which they have moved. Okay, so all these comparisons, okay, about how they must necessarily be different. And again, that we're presupposing that there's a necessity of difference as not only as opposed to the possibility of an extension of already existing relationships. Okay, for example, the notion of friendship. Okay, how is it that friendship now is changed with the social networking of the likes of Facebook and Skype and whatnot, even mobile telephones, you know, that are even these technological devices are determining new conditions of subjectivity and opening new possibilities of intersubjective experience or interaction.